Welcome back to the channel. Today on Thoughts with the Mad Forensic Scientist, we are going to be talking about glyphosate and what its impacts are in terms of from the toxicology and clinical level. So, as you guys probably know, glyphosate suddenly was in the news here with signing over protection for glyphosate for producing glyphosate in the U.S. So domestic production of glyphosate. If you don't know what glyphosate is weed killer. So it's the brand name is going to be Roundup. That's what maybe you're probably more familiar with. It is a weed killer. So the idea of glyphosate was to how it works in the plants is it produces overproduction of cells, so it rapidly produces them up. It actually makes them run out of resources and die. So that's actually how the functionality works with glyphosate is that it speeds up production and it causes them to basically run out of nutrients and to get cell death. That's how it functions. Now, why did glyphosate? A little quick background, I guess, of why glyphosate is suddenly so rampant. So glyphosate is used in weed killer. What picked up a lot was these GMOs, these genetically modified organisms. They modified plants to be immune, basically, to glyphosate. So what you do is you can with these GMOs, these genetically modified plants, if you insert a gene that protects them from glyphosate, you can have your target plant, and you can spray glyphosate all over your crop, and it's going to kill your weeds, but it's not going to kill your plants. If when it says genetic modified organisms, so that's why glyphosate picked up a ton, because you can spray your crops now, and if you have these genetically modified organisms, it's going to protect and kill out the weeds. Also, with these genetically modified organisms, it's going to cue anybody who any genes that aren't passed on. So anytime that if for some reason you have organisms, your GMOs don't have the gene, they'll die too. So it kind of helps keep your population in check in terms of GMO. But yeah, so that's what the rise in the glyphosate is because we have these organisms that we have these plants now that crops that are immune to glyphosate, so they're protected, and you can spray glyphosate, and so that helps reduce. It helps to improve your yield because then you don't have these weeds. You don't have to worry about weeds growing your crop, and it allows you to spray all over your field. Now, glyphosate is considered non toxic to humans. Um, but I want to dig into why that's non-toxic. So there was a study recently talking about finding glyphosate in plants or in food for in Florida specifically. There were some bread studies where they found glyphosate in bread, and I'll dig into that why that's the case, why the glyphosate is there, why it's specifically in bread. But I want to talk into and so when that study came out, toxicologist FDA came out and like, well, the glyphosate these aren't toxic levels. It would take you to eat 19,000 loaves of bread to reach the toxic levels of glyphosate, which is fair, which is true. But I want to dig into what it means when it's not toxic to humans, and what potentially effects are. Because we had RFK come out and say that these glyphosates are most likely linked to cancers. So how can it be linked to cancer and also non-toxic to humans? There's actually a very simple reason for this. Because when they do studies for toxicity, we don't do studies on toxicity in humans anymore. We don't do it on specific individuals. We can't test something whether if we don't know if how it's going to affect somebody, we can't test it on a living, breathing human being. So how do we know? How do we know that it's toxic in humans if we can't test it on humans? Well, we test cell lines. So we have human cell lines, typically stem cells of some sort. So we have these stem lines. We actually have some immortal cells that we've identified from people that will reproduce consistently all the time. And so we have these cell lines from those. So we have these human cells. Those human cell lines, the cell cultures, we can test the chemical on those cell cultures and kind of see how much chemical it takes to be toxic to these cells, which is very useful. That's how we determine if these things are toxic to cells. So glyphosate, I talked about the pathway it works in plants. So it attacks the pathway in plants and causes them to accelerate growth and to expend their nutrients and die. We have a different pathway as humans. We don't have that same metabolic pathway that the plants do. So glyphosate does not impact us metabolically. It doesn't have the same impact that the same cell impact that it does on plants. So it's true. Glyphosate does not impact humans. It is not toxic to human cells. But there's a caveat to that. It's not toxic to human cells. But we're not able to test if it's toxic to humans throughout the body. So it's not toxic on a cellular level to humans, and it's not toxic overall to human processes. But it's not the human processes that are the problem, or that are the issue when it comes to glyphosate. An issue with glyphosate is your gut microbiome. So it may not have an impact on your actual cells, but it does have an impact on your microbiome. So the gut, the bacteria in your gut. Everybody has a crazy amount of flora in your gut, and the glyphosate can act on the pathway of your microbiome. Now, it doesn't impact all your microbiome the same, and they're going to have different thresholds for what they can control, what they can actively take without experiencing cell death. So your bacteria in your gut, that is what's going to be impacted by glyphosate, not your not your cells. It's not toxic to you. It's toxic to your microbiome. Now, we don't know what that's going to do because everyone's microbiome is so unique. It's hard to go in there and to do studies across the board of how it's going to impact. Everybody's microbiome is very different. Everybody's microbiome, how that impacts their body and how that overall impacts their health is very different. So we enter all these extra variables with glyphosate that we don't know how to control. We can't control for them. We can't test them. Can't really do it very well because we can't test the overall organism. And even if we do, we have to go in and identify every single bacteria that's inside someone's microflora. And that microflora fluctuates throughout all the time with your diet, exercise, whether you're taking antibiotics, whether you have infection, things like that, all impact your microbiome. When you have a fever, that your body's trying to kill off your microorganisms, trying to kill off the viruses or bacteria that are inside your body, that impacts. Even if you don't take medicine and you have a fever, it's going to impact your microbiome. That's why sometimes some diseases, when they have high fever, you have gastrointestinal distress, because your microbiome is dying off. They're shedding, they're dying, and so then your body's got to excrete that when they die. So we don't know what glyphosate does to the body exactly, but we've observed problems from glyphosate by it being in our bread system. So why is glyphosate in our bread? Why is it in our wheat specifically? So the way wheat is harvested is that it grows and then it dies, and then you hack it up. You chop it up, and it's dry. Important thing is it needs to be dried, so it dries out in the field. Naturally, the way we would do it before is the wheat would die, it would grow or die, and then it would dry out in the field, and we go through the big reaper and kind of swipe it up. You have the big scythes, things like that, and that's how it worked. But now we have ways to get around it. So now we wait 2 weeks. That's how long it takes for a field to dry. It takes 2 weeks for the field to naturally dry out on its own to be harvested. But what if we can cut that time? So that's what farmers do. They'll spray their fields with glyphosate whenever their wheat is ready, before the wheat can be harvested. So when the wheat's ready to die, we spray it with glyphosate. That kills the wheat faster, dries it out faster, so it saves a ton of time by them dying out, because you can control its death. So instead of waiting for it naturally to die, you can control its death and and kill it. And then so dies dries out way faster, and then you can harvest it faster. So it saves time. It saves the burden of time, and you can control it. You can control when you want to harvest. So then you can rotate your fields. You can choose, okay, I'm going to harvest this field this day, and another field another day. So it's a huge time, it's a huge cost benefit to do that. But in the U.S., we've identified that wheat bread products, they're rough on the gut. We've been having a lot of trouble, a lot of issues. Everybody thinks they're gluten intolerant. Like we have a lot high level of, it seems like, gluten sensitivity. But if these people get genetically tested, they don't have the genetic intolerance for gluten. So why are they sensitive to gluten if they don't have the actual gene for the intolerance? It turns out that it's theorized, hypothetical. The hypothesis is that it is the glyphosate that's causing gastrointestinal problems. It's causing your sensitivity. When someone has a sensitivity to gluten, what they think is gluten or bread sensitivity, if they go to Italy and they eat breads and pastas from foreign countries, like especially like Italy, then their symptoms resolve. It's not tied to the actual wheat molecule. It's not tied to gluten. It's actually tied to what's in the bread, what's extra, the glyphosate. So they think that it's the glyphosate that's destroying your microbiome, destroying your gut, and then that's a problem. So that almost that I'm very confident in that the glyphosate is impacting your gut biome because they work on the same pathways. They do share pathways to your microbiome, and that hasn't been extensively studied because we don't know what everybody's gut microbiome is different. So we don't know how it's going to impact. We don't know. I don't. If I did a study on my microbiome, it's going to be different from your microbiome. So we don't know the impacts. Now, that being said, we don't know the impacts. We don't know what those microbiomes, like how much is being killed, how much is being killed off, what specifically ones are being killed off. Are the good bacteria being killed off and left only with the bad bacteria? Or are the bad bacteria being impacted positively? Are they growing bigger because of not because we're killing off good flora, but because bad flora is benefiting for it and getting boosted and enjoying the glyphosate? It's unknown. But what is known is that if you eliminate, well, they know it's a bread. They think it's a gluten intolerance. So when they remove bread from their diet, they feel better, and then when they eat bread again, they regress. But if they go to Italy and eat bread from Italy, pasta from Italy, they don't feel the same impacts because it's not the bread itself, it's not the molecules in the bread, it's the treatment of the bread. Now, there could also be enrichment, bleaching, things like that. It's not impossible to that. So it doesn't necessarily directly mean that it is glyphosate, but switching to organic and switching to stuff that's not supposed to have um, glyphosate in it, then that also reduces the impacts. So these are all most of these are anecdotal. We haven't done massive studies on it because, like I said, we can't do studies if we don't know if something's toxic, if we don't know if it's going to have truly negative impacts. There's IRBs. There's a lot of studies, a lot of impacts of doing a study on a human. We can't do a lot of human trials because uh, we can't ethically do it. Also, it's complicated. We don't know what someone's biome is going to be and what that's going to impact, and so interpreting the results is also tough. So it's a lot of difficulty with interpretation of data as well as just getting the data in general. So there's a lot of hindrance to it, and it makes it tough. It makes it harder to actually perform these kind of studies. So we don't really know. But what we do know is that, so we don't know if we have theories that this is tied to the leaky gut syndrome, that it's causing that it could be causing the cancer increases of gastrointestinal cancer, of colon cancer, these cancers that are in the gastrointestinal tract. Those are the ones that they're theorizing that this glyphosate could be impacting, and it's basically impacting it because of how it's impacting the microbiome. So it's true, glyphosate is not toxic to human cells. It is not toxic to our cell line, but it is toxic to our microbiome, and we don't know what that does. We frankly don't know what that toxicity does to our microbiome. Are killing off our microbiome? We don't know. It's potentially linked to cancers, but we don't know. And that's going to, of course, be a huge genetic component of whether or not you're going to be able to handle that or not. There's huge genetic components. So it's crazy. In my opinion, it's best to avoid it. And how to avoid glyphosate is going to be organics. So typically, something that's organic means it was not sprayed with pesticide that includes herbicide. So it should not have glyphosate. And the study released just recently performed on breads in Florida. You see that. So the organic breads, like Dave's Killers, they have a 10 ppm or ppb, and then the non-organics have a higher, much higher, 100. So 10 times fold when they're non-organic. There's also some other organics that didn't have any glyphosate, which is great because it's not supposed to. So they're not adding it, but unfortunately, just because you're not adding it does not mean it's not in the soil. So it can be in the soil, it can be in the environment, it can be in another field, and it can kind of get in there. Which is what appears to be what's happening with Dave Killers. They're organic; they're not supposed to have any glyphosate, but it seems they're going to be a minor level. So the thing is, organic technically means they didn't add any, but it doesn't mean that it's free of it. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So just because something is organic, they didn't add it, but it doesn't mean it wasn't there in the first place. It's kind of like added sugar. I didn't add sugar to my orange juice, but orange juice is incredibly sweet because the juice is oranges are incredibly sweet. There's a ton of sugar in there. So I didn't add any sugar to it. So it's no sugar added. But there's plenty of sugar in there because that's just what it is. So it's kind of similar to that. So that's the best way to try to avoid glyphosate. Also, just reducing your bread intake, reducing your carb intake, that also helps. But there's a lot of things that we ingest on the regular that we don't know what it's going to do to us long term. These ultra processed foods, there's a lot of things that we don't truly know because we can't really study it. And then when we see a rise in cancers, we see a rise in diabetes, we see a rise in immunodeficiency diseases, we see rises in these, and we can't truly identify the cause. Is it our diet? Is it our environment? What is it that's specifically causing these things? Is it just genetic breakdown? Is it because our gene pool is not as good as it could be? Is it a sedentary lifestyle now because no, we're not out there working in the fields? There's a ton of variables that cannot be truly controlled for, and so we can't truly say yes or no. It's this or that, or it's this or that, and so that's the problem behind it. But my recommendation is to avoid it. Avoid glyphosate as much as you can, and that's it. It's not going to be good for your microbiome. That's for sure. It's not good for your microbiome. Whether or not that it kills your microbiome, whether or not it's toxic for your microbiome, that's a question. That I can't answer. But I'll tell you right now, it is not good for your microbiome. So I say avoid it. I would say avoid the breads that are listed here that they were found in the study that had glyphosate in them. I would avoid them. I'm avoiding them. That's my recommendation. And I would say check your labels. Check your labels and think about what it is you're ingesting and what these foods are going to do to you. Because when the FDA looks at something, when they study something, they're going to study cell lines. Keep that in mind as well. They're studying whether or not it has a toxic effect on the human cells themselves, not how it's affecting your microbiome or how any long-term effects. If it's not showing short-term toxic effects, that's what they're evaluating. And then, of course, in animal studies, they look for long-term carcinogenics. If they don't see carcinogenics in a long-term study, which long-term in rodent studies is not that long, 6 months, a year, 2 years. But we don't know. Obviously, we live much longer, and our microbiome is much different than of rodents. So that's hard to. It was one thing when it comes to cells. It's another thing when it comes to a biome and a bacteria cells. So we don't truly know. That's the thing. We don't truly know. But I would say avoid glyphosate. Avoid it. Avoid it. Avoid it. Uh, yep. That's what I got to say for that. And that's my thoughts this morning. And I'll catch you guys later. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Join us. Follow us for more content like this. All right. Peace out.